Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Tyler Russell. I'm the Western Canadian manager for NorthStar Genetics, and we're happy to be with you today. Of course, we would have loved to have been in person answering your live questions, but I think this is a pretty good setup, and we look forward to providing a quick 30-minute educational webinar on the benefits of Floury Leafy Corn Silage. It's bred for your cow and for your pocketbook. So without further ado, we'll maybe get into the agenda. We are going to be talking about some of the differences between our silage-specific hybrids versus dual-purpose grain hybrids. We want to walk through what is flowery, what is leafy, as they may be new terms and new concepts and new traits and characteristics that you haven't heard of before or been exposed to at your operations. We're also going to invite Ryan Hargreaves. He's with Country Farm Seeds in Ontario, and he's been working with Floury Leafy Hybrids for the past 8 to 10 years. So it's nothing new for him, and he will be available for some chat questions at the end as well. And then we'll quickly go through our NorthStar Genetics silage varieties that you can look out for in the marketplace and check in on, just so hopefully you can be growing some of these in your field and helping your dairy operation for future years. So, we'll go right into what characteristics does a breeder select for in silage-specific corn hybrids. I didn't know there was a difference in silage-specific hybrids, is some of the questions we often get. And realistically, there's a big difference. And for silage, we're looking for how do we harvest that plant early in the season, maximize its total plant and the total tonnage. How do we get it to ferment as quickly as possible? To be ultimately digestible in the cow. And that really is our focus, is the cow. That's where our silage-specific varieties will show the best. That's where our tests and our trials are best, when we can measure the results in the cow versus in a lab test or in a field. We really want to see how do we get them in the cow, because that's what they're designed for, which is very different than a lot of the varieties. Up to 90% of the varieties on the marketplace today are bred for grain. And a very different pathway, whether it's a late season harvest to get as much cob, to get as many kernels and yield as they can. They don't necessarily care about the plant. They care about the structure, to get it into a combine. How does it dry down as fast as it can? Get it into an elevator, into a rail car, onto a ship, on a barge somewhere to get it to final destination. So they care about the ship. We care about the cow. So when you look at breeding for grain versus breeding for silage, I put up, there are a lot of opposing characteristics. We're just focused on the right column. We want as much total plant as you can, whereas grain are just breeding for the kernels. Silage, we want to get it as moist of kernel as we can, and to stay green as long as we can. We don't want that plant to be drying down like they do in grain. We want our kernels to be as soft as possible so they can break up, easily chewed, versus a grain. Of course, they want it to be as hard so it can ship through the pathway to get it to a ship. Silage, we want that kernel size to be large and not small. In grain, they want it to be as dense as possible for shipping. We want it to be as large as possible to expose and get as many nutrients and breakage as we can. Stock moisture, wet versus 65%. We want our stock to be as soft as possible so it can whip and can be as flexible. It doesn't have as much lignins to it. And of course, our ear height in proportion to the plant, we want it as low as possible, because above the ear tends to have more sugars, tends to have more high digestible starch, and more attributes. So getting that ear as lower is what we're shooting for, versus a grain hybrid, which tends to want it higher so they don't put as much material through the combine. So we are breeding very opposing characteristics. We're breeding for silage. 90% of the corn hybrids are bred for grain. Do you know what yours is bred for? And hopefully it's not just the one where this one stays green longer or it dries down slower, so let's just call it a dual purpose. Dual purpose have their point in the marketplace. They can be used for silage or they can be used for grain, but let's not harbor on it that it's they are bred for grain originally. Other silage characteristics we're looking for in our breeding program, of course, is strong agronomics. a high plant yield, longer harvest window. A lot of people get custom choppers. We want that window to be as wide as we can, shorter storage period for fermentation. We want high starch content, of course, high starch digestibility, and of course, fiber digestibility. And we want it to be able to be fed in all different types of rations, whether that's for lactating cows or for heifers or for calves, and then excellent feed quality as well. This is what we are focused on in that silage specific hybrids. So as we move forward and talk more about our flowery and our leafy, they are new terms, and they're exclusive to NorthStar Genetics in Western Canada. And we're proud to be bringing these to Western Canada, even though we've been working with them in the East for some time. But first of all, what is flowery starch? And maybe to prelude this, flowery starch is different in the marketplace. I'll maybe play a quick 4.5-minute, 5-minute video that goes through it. It's presented by our head breeder, Dr. Francis Glenn, and he can walk through what flowery starch is.
Leafy flowery hybrids feature the same silage-specific characteristics as leafy hybrids, with the addition of more ruminantly available starch for milk production. What we found out by working with nutritionists and nutrition researchers is that starch digestibility is heavily related to particle size. So its particle size affects the ability of the volatile fatty acids in the silage to break down the protein bonds that bind everything together and kind of lower digestion. And the particle size also is very important in the rumen because it gives much more, the finer the particle, the much more area that there is for the rumen microbes to attack or eat the product up and digest it and turn it into microbial protein, which feeds the cow. 18 years ago, I found in our nursery kernels on an ear that were completely flowery inside. And this became the basis of what we now have as leafy flowery hybrids in the marketplace. What we determined along the way was that we were working with a gene called opaque 1. Opaque means that it does not transmit light. So these kernels that you see on the O are on a backlit light table, and no light comes through these flowery kernels, and light comes through the vitreous kernels, which you see all around it. So this is a flowery kernel, and this just mushed in my mouth because it's so soft, and you can see that it is totally white flowery starch on the inside of the kernel. I'll explain the genetics of the leafy flowery hybrids in the market. So flowery is uniform in one of the parents of the cross. Leafy is uniform in the other parent of the cross. The cross between the two gives us leafy flowery seed. These leafy flowery seeds, when planted in the farmer's field, make leafy flowery hybrid plants that have to undergo sexual meiosis in order to set seed on the ear. Meiosis gives the division of the flowery, which is recessive, and the leafy, which is dominant. So 25% of the kernels that are set on the ear are full flowery. The other 75% are like our other leafy hybrids in that they have a high proportion of the kernel that is flowery. This slide shows the shaved kernels of the mature ears of our leafy line, our parent line, which is full flowery, and then an ear of the leafy flowery hybrid, which has 25% of the kernels as full flowery, the ones that are solid white, and then you can see the kernels that are a mixture of yellow vitreous and white flowery. So the big advantage of the more flowery endosperm is in particle size in the final harvested product. Particle size can only be affected by the kernel harvester with its processor on it. So having these softer kernel texture kernels in the product means that we get a lot more small pieces in the saddle. This demonstration compares two dry grain samples to illustrate some of the inherent differences between the hard vitreous kernels that are bred for grain and leafy flowery kernels that are bred for higher starch digestibility. Both samples will be ground at the same grinder setting. The kernels of the grain hybrid produce a meal which has a lot of hard vitreous pieces in it and some flowery starch in there. It is well known now by nutritional scientists that the smaller and finer the particles of starch can be made, the more rapidly they become digestible in the silo and the more rapidly that they can be digested in the cow. The Floury Leafy produces a product that has considerably more of the flowery pieces and very small pieces of the vitreous stuff. So here is data from Cumberland Valley Analytical Services. In this table, you can see the headings across the top, the different kinds of variety that is down the side. And I'll draw your attention to the 7-hour starch digestion rate on leafy floweries. They range from a low of 69 to a high of 77. Comparison to the standard leafy variety, it was at 68%. Leafy traded was 65. A BMR and a dual-purpose variety in the same trials were at 58%. The moistures are on the right-hand column, and you can see that they are very close in terms of moisture, so that means these are very comparable trials. And we got the dry matter yields, and we see that the leafies and the leafy floweries are yielding much better than BMR or dual-purpose. So our new leafy flowery hybrids have all the advantages of the leafy varieties, and they've got the added advantage of smaller particle size, which leads to more starch digestibility in the rumen and more milk.
Great video, explains the benefits of flowery starch. I really love the kernel, the kernel grinder test, and here's another one we put through our coffee grinders, and you can see the difference. So small particle size, longer rumen retention, high energy starch, ration type adaptability, and at the end of the day, high quality milk. And those are the benefits of flowery corn hybrids that we see helping out many dairies and ranchers and feed producers across Western Canada. And it's shifting this curve on high starch digestibility in many of the dual purpose or grain hybrids today are more in that modern grain corn, which has a vitreous dent. Whereas as we move further to the right and our leafy and then our flowery leafy and our flowery kernels, we are increasing the amount of available soft digestible flowery starch. So that's the concept of having more flowery kernels versus the more harder vitreous flint, which even though the starch is there, is not as digestible for the cow. So what is leafy? And Dr. Glenn went through some of the leafy and the leafy floweries, but essentially we are adding a gene to the plant which creates the additional leaves above the ear. So between 4 and 5 leaves, additional leaves above the ear are created in a leafy plant. And when you're adding more leaf area, you're adding more solar panels to that corn plant. So by adding 4 or 5 more leaves above the ear, we're adding about 70% more leaf material above the ear. And on the total plant, about 40% more leaf area on the total plant, because we do lose a leaf or two below the ear, which tends to be not as digestible anyway. So as you've got more solar production in that plant above the ear, effectively, if we were to compare it to some of the dual purpose grain hybrids on the marketplace, a leafy planted in that 28 to 30,000 plant population with 40% more leaf area, it has the equivalent plant stand of probably a grain hybrid planted at 39. So they're big plants. They're able to expand. They also have a flex ear, which is able to expand with the light conditions and create more tonnage in that plant stand. Of course, by creating more leaves above the ear, we are increasing the high fiber digestibility. And also there are more sugars that are produced above the ear as well. So It is a good mix to be putting more wider leaves above that ear for better fiber digestibility compared to some of our other dual purpose or grain corns. You also look at the stalk, as that stalk above the ear as well. Even though it's a little thicker, it has more digestible stalk than a thinner one that has more lignans in a grain corn. Also, leafies tend to have a shorter storage period because they have more plant sugars at harvest, and this helps with fermentation. And having those leafies with a more soft, moister starch can be fed very, very quickly after harvest and after fermentation, which helps decrease the amount of silage that you need to have on hand. So as we look at those 9 traits that we breed for in a silage-specific line, and we compare, our leafies and our flowery leafies to others in the market, whether it's a dual purpose or a BMR, you can see that yes, they need to have strong agronomics for today's world, whether it's Roundup Ready, disease resistance, standability, and that's table stakes. And most of the varieties out there have strong agronomics. And there's a lot of them that produce high total plant yields. And so when you go out and look at them in the field, we can produce a lot of different plants that can produce some tons. But then you get into some of the other traits, whether it's the long harvest window, and you got to remember our flowery leafy hybrids aren't designed to dry down quickly. They're designed to stay in that 65% moisture, 50% milk line for as long as possible and have good stay green technology because their end use is for silage, not for grain. They also have shorter storage periods because of the amount of sugars they're above the ear, so allows for fermentation to happen quickly. Excellent feed quality, excellent fiber digestibility, and this is different because of some of those flowery traits that you can have, and they have good starch in them as well, so they are designed for your cow at the end of the day. And probably its claim to fame is in that high starch digestibility. Coming back to the video, it's all about particle size and getting more surface area to be absorbed regularly into the rumen and to produce more high energy for that cow, and up to the end of the day, higher milk and butterfat levels. So this is what we are designing our hybrids for, really trying to push the curve as it comes to silage. So dual purpose hybrids don't make the ideal silage, and yet those tend to be about 90% of the varieties that are on the market today. And we'd love to change that. So that's a quick background on our flowery leafy hybrids. We're going to shift gears a little bit right now and invite on Ryan Hargreaves, who's a sales manager with Country Farm Seeds in Ontario, to talk about his experience in incorporating flowery leafy hybrids into his ration and into dairy barns' rations out in Ontario. Why have dairies been switching to incorporating flowery varieties in the last few years into their ration?
Yes, well, like I said, with the addition of the flowery gene to those leafy varieties, not only do you get the tons per acre that you're looking for silage, you also have a higher digestible starch available to the cow, about 10 to 12% higher digestibility, leaving it easier for the cow to digest that into an energy. So a lot of producers are taking that into mind when they want to switch to a silage specific variety.
And when you mention like 10 to 12% greater starch digestibility, have producers or dairies, have they seen that right off the hop, or how is that kind of how is that portrayed in some of their butterfat or some of the other numbers that they get?
Okay, so what we generally notice is that with the softer kernel at processing time going into the silo, speeds up the in-silo process inside the silo and allowing for a fermented feed sooner out of the silo. So the sooner we have a more balanced product coming out, you will notice that the milk production, fat production generally start going up within a few weeks or months after fall harvest.
And when you say, this is one of the questions we often get, like, in silos sooner, like how quick are some of these guys feeding their floury leafy product after putting it in the bunk? How quick does it ferment?
I've seen probably anywhere between 10 to 25% faster than usual in the bunk or in the silo. So you're getting a balanced fermented feed sooner into the cow, and which entail is easier to balance the ration and easier for the cow to digest sooner.
So do dairies have to make any adjustments when feeding a floury variety?
Adjustments, not really. You're planting a silage specific variety is one of the main adjustments from guys that are switching from, say, a grain corn or a dual purpose corn. I have seen some of my producers have had reduction in dry matter intake, but they have not seen a reduction in milk production or fat production. Some of my producers have also seen an increase after the dry matter decrease. They're noticing an increase in fat and milk production.
And do they have to, because of the starch digestibility and different things, do they have to do anything different with their corn concentrate or anything else from that side?
Yes, some of my producers have noticed with the floury varieties being highly more digestible that their need for a concentrated corn is not as high, because that is, like I said, the energy production from that starch is easily produced to the cow, so not needing any extra or not a lot of concentrated corn in your ration at that point.
Is there any advice that you would give to a new floury leafy grower? I know some of them out here haven't planted one before. They are maybe just trying it. They're just figuring it out. Are there any advice that you would give a new grower?
Yeah, probably the reduction in plants per acre. Some guys are still planting 34,000 plants per acre, even for silage corn. And we'd like to reduce that plants per acre somewhere between 28 and 30,000 plants per acre, because the benefit is the cob set is lower on the plant itself, allowing for the benefits of the nutrients are in the top part of the plant in silage. So the lower the cob set, the more valuable plant you use. Also with the flex ear, you allow for the ear to flex out and produce more kernels, and then you also get a bigger, wider leaf on the plant itself above the cob, and that helps keep your tons per acre up, and then you have your grain dust over at a very good ration or ratio. Sorry.
Yep. Any other specifics that you would give growers?
No, I think my biggest thing is you really don't have to change anything, except for when you're feeding it, you're going to notice it in the bulk tank. Your fat production should go up. Your milk production should go up. Those sort of things,
Have you ever been able to combine this? Have guys tried to combine it when they've got enough silage and try to put it in?
That's a great question, Tyler. I had guys that have said, we didn't cut it all for silage. We combined it. I'll never do that again, because the kernel is so soft, the cob is soft. It's just not meant to be moved in augers. It just destroys the kernel itself. What I will recommend is that your acres of silage you'll be needing, and if you have a drought year and you don't quite get the production of silage that you're going to need for the year, then you can always add a little bit of grain on top to fill the silo to make sure you get through from year to year.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you for your insights. Hopefully you're able to stay on for the chat. And if people do have questions, they can type them in the chat window, and we'll make sure we connect with you and answer any that you have. So thank you for joining us today, Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Tyler, and thank you, NorthStar Genetics, for having me.
Well, now we're going to go in right at the end. We're nearing the end. We really want to talk about our varieties, our NorthStar genetic varieties. You will see these in the field. You'll see them at the Ag in Motion sites or across multiple trials that we have across Western Canada as well. So we're excited to be showing these hybrids to you. Our main varieties, so Silage Pacific, we're going to start with 917S. This is new to our lineup this year. It's a 77-day Roundup Ready hybrid. It is silage specific, so it's a tall plant. It's a big plant. It does have a flex ear to it. Very good stalk strength, and we recommend a final population in that 32 to 34. And it has silage specific kernels, so it's bred for all of those traits, those 9 specific traits. It does not have flowery and it does not have leafy. But it is a big plant, and we've had we've seen lots of good success with this variety. So look for it in the fields. 917S, 913S. It's also available as 910S in the conventional form, but 913S is a Roundup Ready 2, 74, 75 day relative maturity. It is a full flowery plant, so you'll get that flowery starch endosperm. It's a medium but tall plant for its maturity. It has a flex ear to it, and it comes out of the ground really quick. And you will see the wide leaves starting on it as excellent stalk strength. You will see this out. Probably it's our largest seller because it fits that silage for central Saskatchewan, central northern Alberta, and even central northern Manitoba. Because of the heat units, we're able to get it off a little bit earlier. So it is a great variety for that window. 932 is our earliest leafy flowery hybrid in the marketplace today. We're working on more, but of course it's our newest today. It's an 89-day Roundup Ready 2. Also have it available in the conventional as well as 930. But 932 is a full leafy flowery product. It has a flex ear. We do recommend seeding it a little bit lighter plant population just to give it its room to grow. You will see when it's first coming out of the ground, you will see the extra wide leaf, and it puts on more leaves as it grows. Don't be afraid to get out and look at it. It's really building a base early on in the season. So there may be the odd variety that's taller than it because it maybe has a more erect, but 932, it builds a base. So if you were to stem up those leaves and see how tall it is, you'll see that it's a tall plant, has excellent stalk strength and storage period, and it's resistant to Goss's wilt. So it's a great fit for probably more southern Saskatchewan, southern Alberta, southern Manitoba in that heat unit range. And then there's 961, probably more a fit for into the Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Vauxhall areas, and maybe some around southern Manitoba in the valley. Huge plant. It's a full day. It's 95 day, full flowery leafy, tall plant, flex ear. Won't spend a lot of time on it here because it doesn't probably fit a lot of geographical areas, but a huge plant. As you can see, Travis standing in it, it can get up to 10, 11 feet tall, no problem. So that's our hybrid lineup, and we're really aiming them for how do we increase the tons? How do we give you a longer harvest period, especially for those who need custom chopping? How do we extend it out to give you more benefit out to make sure you have the best nutrient content as you can? How do we increase the feed efficiency, increase the milk production, and at the end of the day, increase the profitability for your operation? And that's what we're really looking for. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your time and attention this morning. Hopefully it was a great session for yourself. If you do have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out to any NorthStar Genetics representative. They'd be pleased and happy to help answer your questions. We do also have a great brochure designed for making milk. It's available in printed copy and also online at our website, www.northstargenetics.com. It is a great resource, has a lot of information, research, and it's a fairly easy read. So I encourage you to take a read through that in your spare time as well. And if there's any questions, we would love to take them. So thank you.